Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching the Today I Found Out YouTube channel, and in the video today we're looking at when does a speed limit actually come into effect. On paper, speed limits sounds like a pretty simple idea. Legislators and experts agree upon a given speed at which it is deemed safe to travel through an area and then let the public know by clearly signposting it. But a question that is often asked is when exactly does a speed limit legally come into effect? Now, here is the answer. Any signposted speed limit comes into effect at the exact point the sign resides. In other words, if you're driving at 30 miles per hour through a 30 miles per hour zone and you're about to enter a zone that allows you to drive at 50 miles per hour, it is technically illegal to begin accelerating beyond 30 miles per hour until you've reached the sign indicating the higher speed limit. Contrary to what people may try to tell you, by the letter of the law, there is no buffer or grace period near a speed limit sign, which is why you'll notice that when the speed limit decreases drastically, you may see a helpful warning sign telling you to slow down before the actual speed limit sign, so you're not suddenly having to slam on the brakes to get down to the posted limit before you reach the sign. While it is certainly true that a police officer pulling you over in such a buffer scenario could be lenient and decide to let you off with a warning, that is entirely down to their own discretion, and it doesn't change that you've legally broken the law. This is true in the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom, with all of the documentation we consulted saying the same basic thing, that a new speed limit zone begins at the exact point a sign is placed. What does vary between these countries, however, are the tolerances we allow in cases involving speeding. In the UK, we have something colloquially known as the 10% rule, which states that you can generally get away with exceeding the signposted speed limit by about 10%. Again, though, this is entirely down to the discretion of the police, and it's noted that technically exceeding a speed limit by any amount whatsoever is an absolute offence. However, official guidelines state that an officer can choose to take no action or simply give a stern warning if a person only exceeds the speed limit within the bounds of 10% plus an additional 2 miles per hour, after which they are, by the letter of the law, required to take action regardless of how good a mood the officer is in, the severity of which depends on a combination of their own discretion and how much the individual was speeding by. In the United States, things are a little more complex and the tolerances vary from state to state, with many leaving it entirely up to the discretion of the officer who pulls you over. Although most states do have speeds which they consider to be reckless, this too varies quite a bit depending on where you are. Even in states where official tolerances, on freeway speeds at least, exist, there is still no universal consensus on exactly how much you can go over the limit, though the Federal Highway Administration recommends that speed measurements at the selected road segments shall be used to determine the top 5% of speeds. This information will be used to establish the enforcement threshold. The enforcement threshold should never be less than 5 miles per hour above the new posted speed limit. This top-down strategy will not overwhelm the law enforcement officers, the prosecutors, or the courts. This strategy promotes public and court acceptance of enforcement by targeting only the most egregious violators. The overall goal of the enforcement efforts is motorist compliance, not issuance of citations. This unofficial buffer in speed is a good thing because whenever you're driving, your car's speedometer likely isn't perfectly accurate, even if you're just driving it off the lot brand new with properly inflated stock tires. With many cars, particularly in the European Union, your speedometer will actually be indicating that you're going faster than you are. This is because, by law in the EU, the speedometer can never show speeds less than the speed you are really traveling. To account for tires wearing down, temperature and pressure variation, varying loads in the vehicle, and the like, manufacturers tend to err on the side of caution, indicating you're going faster than you are, but also by law must not fudge the numbers more than an additional 10% or 4 kilometers an hour. According to Transport Canada, there are no such official regulations at the federal level in North America, though they aren't wholly correct in that the US does have federal standards concerning commercial vehicles not to be off by more than 5 miles per hour at a 50 mile per hour reading on the speedometer. The manufacturers in this case will calibrate the speedometer to the stock tires with new tread and properly inflate it. As the tire changes for various reasons, the speedometer will be slightly off, with variations generally within the range of plus or minus 10%, though if you choose to buy replacement tires with a different size than your factory tires, your speedometer may be off by even more, making the unofficial speed buffer given by police particularly useful. As for the argument about whether or not speed limits work in various scenarios and how the values are set, that's a can of worms we'll save for another video. So we'll instead end by throwing some interesting country-intuitive road-related factoids at you. For starters, one of the most popular speed-controlling interventions of all, speed bumps kills numerous people every year by slowing emergency vehicles, according to the chairman of the London Ambulance Service. This is a notion backed up by a study in Boulder, Colorado that indicated that for every life saved by various traffic slowing measures like speed bumps, an astounding 85 people die because of this slowing effect on emergency vehicles. In addition to that, according to research done on the roads of New Zealand, the common zebra-striped crosswalk without any additional signalling actually increases the chance of pedestrians getting hit by a car by 28% over if the person had just jaywalked. It is thought that this is the case because pedestrians crossing in crosswalks are much less careful than those crossing the road elsewhere, even to the point that many people observed in the study didn't bother to look if anyone was coming before entering a crosswalk. Another study done in the United States on over 1,000 marked and unmarked popular crossing areas also showed that marked locations had a much higher rate of pedestrian accidents than unmarked, so long as there weren't other signals included with the crosswalk, such as a stop sign light or flashing lights. They also found that including a raised safety median for pedestrians to stand on in the middle of roads made no difference for the safety of pedestrians, regardless of the number of lanes on the road. On a similar note, as we've recently covered in another video, most road hazard signs have been shown to be worthless in terms of decreasing accidents, despite costing billions of taxpayer dollars to put in place. We'll put a link to that video below. So I really hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, please do click that like button below. It really helps us out. And if you haven't already, do subscribe to our channel for brand new videos every day of the week. Also, over there on the right are a couple of other videos you'll probably enjoy if you enjoyed this one. And if you did like this, do share this with a friend. There's some social sharing tabs below, so check those out. And thank you for watching.